The coffee mug in my hand was still hot when I heard the car pull into the driveway. I set it down on the kitchen counter and looked at the clock above the stove. 6:47 inches the evening. Christmas Eve. Through the window above the sink, I could see the headlights cutting across the frost on the front lawn, my lawn, the one I'd reseeded twice after my son-in-law let the sprinkler system run all summer without checking the pressure valves. I dried my hands on the dish towel and went to the door. My daughter Claire was first up the porch steps, a foil-covered dish balanced in both arms, her coat unbuttoned in the cold. She was smiling, the kind of smile that takes effort. Behind her came Derek, my son-in-law, carrying nothing, his hands in the pockets of a jacket I'd never seen before. Expensive looking, new. I held the door open. "Merry Christmas," I said. Claire kissed me on the cheek. "Merry Christmas, Dad. It smells amazing in here." Derek walked past me without a word. I stood there for a moment, watching him cross the living room toward the couch, watching him drop onto it and reach for the remote control on the coffee table. My coffee table. The one my wife Margaret had picked out 31 years ago from a furniture store in Columbus that didn't exist anymore. I closed the door and went back to the kitchen. My name is Raymond. I'm 64 years old. I spent 38 years as a licensed contractor in Central Ohio, built a good business, raised a daughter I was proud of, and paid off this house the year Margaret was diagnosed. She passed 4 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 12 weeks from diagnosis to the end. After that, the house got quieter than I knew a house could get, and I found out what it meant to rattle around inside a place you built with your own hands. Claire was 29 when her mother died. She and Derek had been married for 2 years by then. I liked him well enough at the beginning. He was charming in the way some men are charming, all eye contact and firm handshakes and remembering small details you mentioned once. He worked in commercial real estate. He talked about deals the way some men talk about battles. Always the one who saw the angle nobody else saw. Always the one who came out ahead. I tried not to form opinions too quickly. The first time I lent him money, it was 18 months after Margaret's funeral. Derek came to me alone, without Claire, said he had a short-term cash flow situation with a property deal and needed $22,000 for 60 days, maybe 90 at the outside. He had paperwork, an LLC agreement, a projected return schedule, a promissory note he'd typed up himself. I read it over. It looked professional. I wrote the check. 90 days came and went. I didn't say anything for another 30 days after that. I told myself these things take time. Real estate deals have complications. I didn't want to create tension between Derek and Claire. She had started to seem tired in a way that worried me. The way your own child's face can tell you things she won't say out loud. At the 6-month mark, I brought it up gently, privately, on a Sunday afternoon when Claire had gone to the grocery store and Derek and I were alone in this same living room. He told me he was working on it. He said the deal had restructured. He said he'd have something for me by the end of the quarter. He looked me in the eye the whole time. He was very good at that. I nodded and let it go. That was my mistake. The first one. Over the following year, I let Derek use my contractor's license twice for smaller residential projects he said he was managing. In Ohio, you need a licensed contractor to pull permits on anything above a certain dollar threshold. I was retired. My license was still active. He said he'd handle everything, that my name wouldn't be tied to anything complicated, that it was just paperwork. I signed where he told me to sign. Claire came by the house less frequently. When she did, she seemed careful around me, the way someone is careful when they're holding something breakable and pretending they aren't. I didn't push. By the time December rolled around, I had been hosting Christmas Eve at my house for 6 years, every year since Margaret's last Christmas. It was the thing I held on to. The decorations came down from the attic the first weekend of December, the same ornaments, the same lights Margaret had wrapped in tissue paper and labeled in her handwriting, the star she'd bought at a craft fair in Granville the year Claire was born. I cooked for 2 days, a standing rib roast, sweet potato casserole, green beans with almonds, 2 kinds of pie. This particular Christmas Eve, my brother-in-law Thomas was there, Margaret's younger brother, who drove in from Dayton every year because he said it was the only Christmas that still felt like Christmas. My neighbor Phil came, a widower himself, 71, who I'd been having coffee with every Tuesday morning for the past 3 years. And of course Claire and Derek. Dinner was at 7. I had the table set by 6. Margaret's good china, the ivory set with the gold rim she'd been given at our wedding, crystal glasses, cloth napkins she had embroidered herself, a hobby she picked up the last winter she was well. Everyone was seated. I brought the roast out from the kitchen on the board I'd used for 20 years and set it at the head of the table. Thomas was already talking, that easy way he had of filling a room with warmth. Phil was laughing at something. Claire was pouring water from the pitcher, moving carefully around her husband who had not stood up to help with anything. I sat down. Derek looked at the table for a moment. Then he looked at me. He said, without lowering his voice, without any particular expression on his face, "I don't eat off old dishes. I don't know who used these before." The table went quiet. I looked at him. He was already pushing his chair back. He stood up, walked into my kitchen, and came back 40 seconds later, carrying a paper plate from the package I kept in the cabinet above the refrigerator, the ones I used for cookouts in the summer. He set it down in front of himself. Then he picked up the cloth napkin from his setting, the one Margaret had embroidered, and moved it to the side without looking at it. Thomas had stopped talking. Phil's glass was halfway to his mouth and he didn't put it down. Claire was looking at her own plate with an expression I didn't have a word for. I said nothing. I served the roast. I served the casserole. I passed the green beans. I made sure Thomas's glass was full and that Phil had enough of the sweet potato. I ate my dinner. I listened to Thomas try to restart the conversation, watched him work to bring warmth back into the room, and I loved him for it. Derek ate off his paper plate and said very little. At one point, he took a phone call and walked out to the living room for 10 minutes while the rest of us sat at the table. Claire apologized for him with her eyes. She was good at that by now. After dessert, after Thomas and Phil had both said goodnight and I had walked them to the door and stood on the porch in the cold watching their taillights disappear down the street, I came back inside and found Derek on the couch again. The television on, shoes off, feet on the coffee table. Claire was helping me clear the dishes. She was very quiet. I washed and she dried, the way we had done when she was a girl, when she was small enough that she had to stand on a step stool to reach the counter. I didn't say anything about what had happened at the table. Neither did she. We worked through the dishes, the good china, the crystal, the casserole dishes, and when we were done, I handed her the last dish towel to hang, and I told her I was tired and that I loved her. She hugged me for a long time before she let go. I went to bed, and I lay in the dark, and I looked at the ceiling, and I thought about Margaret's napkins, the one he'd moved aside without looking at it. And I made a decision. I want to be clear about something. It wasn't anger. Anger burns fast and makes you careless. What I felt that night was more like a door closing. Quiet. Final. I was 64 years old. I had worked every day of my adult life. I had built things with my hands that were still standing. I had taken care of my wife until the last hour, and I had not asked anyone for anything. And I had let this man, this particular man, accumulate a debt against me, financial and otherwise, that I had been too patient and too careful to address. I wasn't going to be patient anymore. The next morning was Christmas Day. I let the house stay quiet. I had my coffee. I made one phone call to my accountant, Martin, who I had known since 1987 and who I trusted completely. I told him what I needed him to look at. I told him to start with the promissory note and work forward from there. Then I called my attorney, a woman named Barbara who had handled Margaret's estate and who was not someone who used extra words. I told her I would be in her office the day after Christmas. It took Martin 11 days to put together a complete picture. What he found was this. The $22,000 loan had never been applied to any real estate deal. The LLC on the paperwork Derek had given me existed on paper and nothing else. It had been formed 30 days before Derek approached me and dissolved 6 months later. The money had gone into a personal account in Derek's name alone, not a joint account with Claire. And from there it had moved in small increments to a series of expenses Martin described as personal consumption. Restaurants, A lease payment on the new car I'd seen in the driveway. Clothing. A weekend in Nashville I'm certain Claire didn't know about. That was the 22,000. The permits were worse. Derek had used my contractor's license not twice, as he'd told me, but 6 times. On 4 of those projects, he had collected deposits from clients, residential homeowners who had hired what they believed was a legitimate licensed contractor and had either done incomplete work or no work at all. The total amount collected across those 4 jobs was just over $68,000. My name was on the permits. My license number was on the contracts. I sat in Martin's office and I read through the documents he'd printed and organized in a folder, and I did not say very much. Martin watched me read. When I got to the last page, he said, "Carefully, Raymond, you need to understand that your license could be at risk here. You need to get ahead of this." I told him I understood. I called Barbara from the parking lot. What happened next took time. The way these things do. Barbara filed a formal complaint with the Ohio Construction Industry Licensing Board before any other move, which established clearly that I was the victim of fraudulent misuse and not a participant. She gathered everything Martin had documented and handed it to a detective in the Financial Crimes Unit of the County Sheriff's Office, whose name I won't use here, but who was professional and thorough in a way that gave me confidence. I did not tell Claire any of this. Not yet. I needed to know the full shape of it before I brought it to her. She was my daughter, and she was going to be hurt by this, and I owed her the truth in a complete form, not in pieces. During those weeks, I kept my distance from both of them. I declined 2 invitations from Claire to come for dinner. I told her I had projects around the house. That wasn't untrue. I repainted the hallway. I fixed the gate on the back fence that had been sticking since September. I had coffee with Phil on Tuesday mornings and I didn't talk about any of it. Just sat with the comfortable silence of someone who had known you long enough to not need to fill every minute. I thought about the paper plate a lot. Not with bitterness, exactly. More with clarity. The paper plate was just the moment when a person showed you, without any ambiguity, exactly what they thought of you. Some people give you that moment and you look away from it. I had looked away from a lot of moments with Derek. The first time he interrupted Claire at a dinner table and she stopped talking mid-sentence and smiled at her plate. The time he referred to my work, my 38 years of building things, as just construction stuff. The way he never once asked about Margaret. Not once in 4 years. Not a single question about who she was or what she meant to the people who loved her. The paper plate was just the last one. The clearest one. The detective called me on a Thursday morning in late January. He told me Derek was going to be brought in for questioning and that based on what they had, charges were likely. He told me it might be helpful for me to speak with Claire before that happened, so she didn't hear it first from a phone call she wasn't prepared for. I called her and asked her to meet me at the diner on Morse Road where we used to go when she was in high school, the one with the corner booth she always picked because you could see the whole room from there. She said she could be there at noon. I got there early. I ordered coffee, and I waited. She came in and she saw my face and she sat down across from me and she said, very quietly, "How bad is it?" I told her everything. I put the folder Martin had prepared on the table between us and I walked her through it. I didn't soften it and I didn't rush it. I owed her the complete truth and I gave it to her. She didn't cry while I was talking. She read what I put in front of her. She asked questions, good ones, specific ones about the permits and the clients, and what exposure I had with the licensing board. I answered everything I could. When I got to the part about the Nashville weekend, the one I was certain she hadn't known about, her face changed in a way I recognized because I had seen that same expression on her mother's face once, years ago, in a completely different situation. It was the expression of someone rearranging everything they thought they knew. She was quiet for a while after I finished. Then she said, "Did you know? When I married him?" I told her no. I told her that I had had doubts about some things, but nothing I could have pointed to, nothing concrete, and that whatever doubts I had kept to myself because I thought it wasn't my place and because she seemed happy in the beginning. I told her I was sorry I hadn't pushed harder when the money didn't come back. She shook her head. She said that wasn't on me. We sat in that corner booth for 2 hours. The coffee went cold and we ordered fresh cups, and those went cold too. At some point, she started to talk about the things she had pushed aside, the small moments that had bothered her and that she had talked herself out of. And I listened to all of it without interrupting. That was what she needed more than anything, I think, to say it out loud to someone who wasn't going to tell her she was overreacting. Derek was charged 6 weeks later. The charges included theft by deception, misuse of a contractor's license, and fraud. The district attorney's office contacted Barbara about the possibility of a plea agreement, which would involve Derek paying full restitution to the 4 homeowners he had defrauded, repaying what he owed me, and entering a supervised probation program rather than serving time. Barbara laid out both options for me: trial, with the possibility of a prison sentence, or the plea, with guaranteed restitution and a permanent criminal record. I chose the plea. I want to explain that choice because I know some people won't agree with it. Some people will say he should have done time. Maybe they're right. But here is what I thought about. Those 4 homeowners, ordinary people who had saved up for a kitchen remodel or a new roof. They needed their money back more than they needed Derek in a cell. My license had already been cleared by the board. My reputation was intact, and a trial meant another year of this living inside my life, inside Claire's life. And I was 64 years old. I had things I wanted to do with my time that had nothing to do with Derek. The restitution order was formal and legally binding. He would pay the homeowners in full. He would pay me back the $22,000 with interest. It would take years, but the obligation was real, and it was documented, and his credit, his license eligibility, his professional standing were all contingent on it. Claire filed for divorce 2 weeks after the charges were filed. She didn't ask me what I thought. She told me what she had decided. I told her I supported her completely. She moved out of the house she and Derek had been renting and needed a place to stay while she got things sorted out. I have a second bedroom. It's been empty for 4 years. I told her she could stay as long as she needed. She made me promise that she was actually helping around the house and not being taken care of. I said I would think about it. She laughed for the first time in a long time when I said that. It was the laugh I recognized from when she was young, unguarded and real. The one that sounded like her mother's. That was 3 months ago. She's still here. She got a new job, a better one, doing project management for a firm downtown. She's up early and home for dinner most nights, and sometimes she helps me with things around the house. Real help. The kind where she actually knows what she's doing because she grew up watching me work. On Tuesday mornings when I have coffee with Phil, she gets up before I do and starts the pot. Some evenings we sit in the living room after dinner, the television on or not, and she asks me about the old days, the houses I built, the projects I'm most proud of, the stories about her mother I haven't told enough times. I tell them, I take my time with them. Some nights I get out the photo albums and we go through them slowly, and she asks questions she never thought to ask before, and I answer every one. The star Margaret bought at the craft fair in Granville, the one from the year Claire was born. It's in the box in the attic. We'll put it on the tree this December. We'll use the ivory china with the gold rim. We'll have Thomas in from Dayton and Phil from next door and whoever else Claire wants to invite. I built this house. I've been in it for 31 years. Every room in it has a story in it. A thing that happened. A meal that was cooked. A conversation that mattered. This is my house. It has always been my house. There is a lesson in this somewhere, and I've thought about how to say it simply. This is what I've come to. Quiet is not the same as weak. Patient is not the same as passive. There are men who will look at your kindness and decide it is a resource to extract, and they will keep doing that right up until the moment you show them otherwise. The showing is the important part. Not loudly, not angrily. Just clearly. Derek sat at my table on Christmas Eve and reached into my kitchen for a paper plate because he had decided, at some point, that I was someone who would absorb anything. He was right that I would absorb a great deal. He was wrong about everything else. The coffee is on. Claire's car is in the driveway. There is half a pie left from last night in the refrigerator, and tomorrow morning I am going to have a piece of it for breakfast because I am 64 years old and I built a good life, and I have earned a piece of pie for breakfast. If I want one, that's the lesson. That's all of it.